Hello everyone! Today we are going to talk about Excel. Entering the mid-split break, they've set themselves up with a 4-5 record after winning 4 out of their last 5 games versus SK, Schalke, Vitality and G2, losing only to Misfits in this run. Although these teams are not the Mad Lions, the G2s with Perks, Fanatics or Rogues, this win streak is still very impressive as the LEC is really competitive this year, basically with 9 teams that are all legitimate contenders for playoffs. Form after the break is going to be super important in determining which teams will get their playoff spots and for the pre-playoff power rankings, as we should be able to see the real forms coming into it. This week we are going to talk about Excel and their late form. On the one hand, I was hopeful for this team as I really like the roster and how they are complementing each other. Special plays for mid-prior all the time, Kadriel plays for his laners, and Kreis and Patrick are monster carries that can take control over games. The jungle meta of those non-mechanical junglers is good for Excel as Kadriel is not great mechanically, and the fact that generally no one plays around top should let Kreis get away with his special counter picks and scaling with them. The start of the season was rough, as even though Excel had some good early games, they couldn't really convert those into wins. They were getting better from game to game though, and this run of 4 out of 5 wins is the proof. In this video, we will review their 4 wins and talk about their strengths and weaknesses and what we would like to see them work on now that they have this break. We won't go over 4 full games of course, I'll show you guys the highlights that were recurring themes in most of their games. Let's start with their strengths then. Firstly, Excel is relatively consistently getting early game leads, mainly by helping stabilize top in the early game, as Kreis picks a lot of scaling picks, and then by playing really well around their bot lane's wave and priority, utilizing both Special and Kadriel to execute a lot of well coordinated dives that put Patrick in favorable positions. Let's look at 2 plays where they did exactly that. At around the 8th minute in Excel's game versus SK, Excel's bot lane stacked a wave and slow pushed it into the tower. Special got prio at the right time to answer before Zazie, even though it could have been optimal if he could have pushed a bit sooner. These sort of dives are of course pretty telegraphed, and Trick was there to answer. Excel got the first blood, and thanks to a really bad kick from Trick, Kadriel even got out alive. In their game versus Schalke, Excel started stacking the wave at the 10th minute, while they have a TF and TP advantage. Schalke tried to react to the dive by moving Lurox in and getting mid prio, but you can't really get there before TF, and the TP advantage was unrecoverable. Excel cleanly and easily got their 2 kills, placed first tower and denied some minions from Schalke. Secondly, when not randomly inting on the map, and we will talk about it when we'll get to their weaknesses, Excel knows how to use neutrals and different map states to their advantage, accelerating leads pretty effectively. When they have an early game lead entering the mid game, they do the correct rotations to get every tier 1 tower. With their first Baron, they rotate beautifully to get the tier 2 towers and more. At their game versus Vitality, Excel got the Baron at around the 25th minute. They sent Special Bot, Kreis top, and their 3-man squad mid. They crashed their waves at a really good time, making Vitality answer the 3 lanes almost simultaneously. They held Vitality in that position for a minute or so before forcing Labrov to move bot to try and make a play. When they saw him, Kreis started rotating mid and Patrick crashed the wave. They immediately went in for the dive with numbers advantage and killed NG. Then they crashed the wave into the Nib tower and took the last outer turret in the bot lane and the second Infernal. These coordinated wave crashes are basic fundamental plays to accelerate games through all of the lanes. It's very effective because the Baron minions are very hard to clear and there are almost no comps that can handle 3 of those waves at the same time. A lot of teams tend to fail the triple crash, playing in a 4-1 formation instead with mid and one of the side lanes. The 1-3-1, while being more risky, is generally more rewarding, and Excel managed to execute it really well, getting their turrets faster than with the traditional setup. Secondly, let's look at Excel's game versus SK. Excel got into the mid game with a gold lead. At the 18th minute, after winning a skirmish top and getting a pick bot while pushing both waves, they also had tempo advantage, and they had set their eyes on the outer mid lane turret. It's generally very hard to take this turret versus Zoe, Ezreal and GP, who all have really good wave clear. Kreis and Special shoved the side waves, and Kreis pulled attention from SK members. While Genax was answering top, Special rotated mid and Kreis backed off, so the rest of Excel could get the tower. By forcing SK's members to try and deal with Kreis, who couldn't be 1v1'd anymore at this point, Excel have managed to thin them out by pressuring the other side of the map, and collapsing mid securing the outer mid lane turret, which makes playing around objectives much easier. Lastly, it kinda relates to the last point, but Kreis is so good at mid and late game side laning. He knows his limits really well, pushing them as far as he can, making the enemies react all the time, giving his team a lot of space on the map. He almost never gets caught, and even if he does, he usually outplays. When he gets to the mid and late game at a strong point, he is a force to be reckoned with, and for my money, he showed the best side laning in the entire league. And now, for Excel weaknesses. We'll start with Kadrel. Still one of the smartest junglers in Europe, his early pathing is generally really good. But except for being probably the worst mechanical jungler in the league, maybe except for Trick, Kadrel can't really snowball early game leads except by preparing a dive bot. He covers his laners well and when they need to, even if it means opting into a losing 2v2, which makes him fall behind sometimes, which is not entirely his fault. But again, my main point is that when Kadrel gets an early game lead, he never pushes it forward by playing through the jungle. He is not trying to steal camps, force the guy out of his jungle, deny ganks. He only plays through his laners by covering them at the right time or setting gank spot, which also makes him relatively predictable. Let's look at one example that shows this point really well. To understand how Kadrel got his lead in their game versus Vitality, let's look at NG's path. He started blue, ran all the way to Krags, which is already weird. Then he took his red and ran straight to the bot side scuttle. Think of how much time this guy spent wandering around the rift instead of clearing camps or helping his laners. From bot side to top side to bot side. Meanwhile, Kadrel cleared his entire top side into bot side and went to the top side scuttle. At the 3rd minute, without any form of intervention from the laners or any fighting, Kadrel was gifted a 2 camp lead. Then he got first blood top while NG cleared his bot side. Instead of matching the recall instantly after the wolves, so NG could ever be in a position to fight the Volibear, NG ran straight into Kadrel's raptors, which were not even up. Then he gave himself what should have been the killing blow. He showed mid, with no items, trying to gank special. Seeing that, even if he got the kill, should have been the killing blow for his jungle matchup. Kadrel should have instantly ran into his jungle to take his camps or force a fight. Instead, he gave up the Krag contest, probably because of the top wave. A more aggressive jungler, like Jankos for example, could have easily punished this play, following him to the Krags, forcing him out, or even forcing a 2v2 versus the flashless Sion would have probably net Excel an even bigger lead, but instead he just moved back and cleared his own jungle. For Excel's second weakness, we have Kry's early game wave management and coordination with his jungler. It's very lacking, especially in his Kayle and Vlad games. Kadrel needs to help him shove out waves when it's clear that they are losing the 2v2. If the enemy jungler knows how to read the situation and counter, this usually ends up in an early game deficit either for Kryze, for Kadrel or for both. We'll start with their early game versus SK. Kryze somehow ended up slow pushing the wave into Gen X. GP is way stronger at this point of the game than Kayle, and Kayle can't really shove a lane fast at this point. He had to put himself in a very gankable situation, needing to shove the wave all the way to the tower to reset it. Kadrel was pathing top to protect him, but Trick came to punish. Trick took a really weird path, which left him at level 2, so Kadrel forced him out. Then, Kadrel helped Kryze shove his lane, as he lost all of his mana and potion stacks, but still couldn't force the GP under his tower. Trick did a gromp and got level 3 finally, and came again. Luckily for Excel, Trick played it pretty poorly, and they didn't lose a single summoner. Excel managed to kill enough creeps to reset the wave, but Kadrel got double grabbed because of that play and the bot side priority SK had, putting him 2 camps behind Trick, though thanks to Trick's useless hovers around bot ahead in tempo. A better jungler would have come top lane at level 3 and not at level 2, forcing Kadrel completely out and throwing Kryze out of the game. Next, we have Excel's game versus Schalke. Kryze let GP push into him in the early game while Kadrel was pathing towards top. Kadrel got a crab and then instantly moved to the bot side of the map to take the other crab, while Kryze had to push out his lane, knowing that Lurox is up there. He had to back and TP with an item to make the gank harder for Schalke, as he was completely left out to dry. Luckily for him, Odo got over greedy with the trade and Lurox didn't come soon enough, so he managed to get a lot from the situation. Versus better teams, that should have been at least his flash and some creeps. Lastly, there are those random ints in the mid and late game. I don't know what with those players, but even in those 4 wins there were 9 different mid to late game missed positions that caused Excel members to either die or lose a flash. The player that is the worst at this is Special with 5 out of those 9 ints, but it really happens way too much on this team. In correlation to this, Special had not been very good this split. This guy had a few good games, and his laning phase is usually pretty solid. He roams at good timings together with Kadrel in the early game. But this guy's late game is a disgrace, and it seems like it's mostly coming from nerfs. Getting caught everywhere, whiffing shockwaves, and throwing summoners for nothing is a common theme with this guy in positions he can obviously play better. Right now, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because some of the mistakes he makes are some really basic stuff that can be easily fixed, like getting caught all the time in the mid to late game. Even with his terrible games, he showed a lot of promise in some of the other games and fights he played, but this guy has to step up for Excel to go far in playoffs. The strengths and weaknesses are here in front of you on the screen. Personally, and I've said it before, I was pretty excited for this team coming into the split. With that said, I don't think that as of now, they are the fourth best team in Europe. Cadrell's inability to play carry junglers or snowball an early game through his matchup, his predictable play around Kryze in the early game, which of course comes mostly from Kryze's own wave management mistakes. Also, there are the set dives around bot that they have to prepare minutes in advance. All of those things are making this team easily scoutable and counterable. To beat Excel right now, all you have to do is to get a top lane pick that can force the wave to stay in a bad position and path towards top in your first clear into a winning 2v2. Jankos and G2 showed that this predictableness is really easy to counter in the early game, even though they eventually lost. Without ironing these early game fumbles, I don't see this team as a real world contender. Oh, and those mid game ints are really disgusting. On the other hand, the potential is there. Kryze and Patrick are amazing, Special generally does his job in the early game at least, and their set plays around bot are really good, but again, predictable. The problem with this team is that it wasn't here for spring. They are a one-trick pony, exactly like Mad Lions were in spring, as this roster's solo laners are pretty young. Next year this lineup can for sure be top 4, but as of now, if they don't show significant improvements in their early game wave management and pathing and some diversity in the early to mid macro plays, this team will get scouted out and fall off a cliff later in the year. Thank you everyone so much for watching, check out my channel for more videos that I have done. Make sure to subscribe if you'd like to see some future content. Also, as a side note, I really like debating those points with you guys in the comments. If you disagree with me or have any questions, feel free to ask me on YouTube, Reddit or Twitter. I will always give you an answer.